Good morning, everybody. Today we're going to teach you how to make this in the hoop quilt blocks. So you can complete a quilt, or you can use these for table runners, make bags, basically anything you like after the blocks are stitched. Now these are completely done in the hoop, front and back. This is what the back looks like. So you can see the back is quilted as well, and the front has patchwork on. Everything we will complete in the hoop, so there's no need to re-hoop anything. It's one hooping per block, and then we're going to sew our blocks together, and then we're going to add a binding around to show you how to make a simple quilt. If you make a table runner, it will be done in a similar way. You will just connect the amount of blocks you want, add your binding. So it doesn't matter if you make a full quilt or you just make a table runner, the method will be the same. First of all, let's see what we're going to need. I'd really recommend that you get yourself a set of quilting rulers. I've got these two. This is quite a wide one and then a little bit narrow one, but they are nice and long, so that you can really square off your fabric perfectly and cut it in a nice size. For batting, I'm using this very thin. You can see how thin it is. We call it in South Africa Loomtex. It might be called something else in different countries. Do experiment with whatever batting you like to use, or wadding as in some countries it's called. It doesn't really matter which one you use. You can even use a thicker one if you want. I prefer the thinner one, as this is going to be a quilt. I don't want my quilt to be hard. I want it to be quite soft. For that reason as well, I'm going to use water-soluble Vilene as my stabilizer. Some people prefer to hoop your batting. As you would see, Ruth Harvey, the previous video she made, she actually hooped her batting. The reason I didn't do this in this video is to just show you a different method as well, because many people say then they sit with the batting in the seam allowance. Now, with this method I'm going to show you, you will not have any batting in your seam allowance, as you can see from this block. I only got the soluble in between, and that will wash out anyway. So your quilt is nice and soft and not hard at all. So this is your batting you're going to use. For your stabilizer, you're going to use your water-soluble Vilene. Only one layer is needed. You don't need two layers. You can use cutaway or tearaway if you would like, but do bear in mind you will have a much thicker block then. That's more stiff. One of these blocks where I actually used thicker batting and stabilizer in between, and you can see it's quite a stiff block. It's not as soft and pliable as this one, for example. So let's get started. First of all, you're going to need, let's take this example. You're going to need 2 pieces of fabric. I'm going to use the green over there. Then for the back, I'm also going to use a layer of green, but I'm going to actually turn it around so I've got the darker side. For that, this is a suede-like fabric, nice and soft. You can use any fabric that you like. It doesn't really matter, whatever you prefer. Cotton works very well for quilts. I do like to combine with different fabrics that's got different textures, just to make it look a little bit more elegant and make it feel nice and soft. So for your green, and then I will use another layer for the back. You're also going to need your floral fabric. I ran out of my Christmas fabric because I finished my quilt stitching, all that, so I'm just going to show you with a different fabric how we're going to do this block. So I'm going to use this sunflower in this region where I've got the print. And then I'm going to use these smaller pieces for those areas. Now this is a piece, that's another piece, and then you've got 2 pieces there. So that's why I've got 2 of each, because I'm going to alternate 1 piece that side and 1 piece that side. The reason I'm doing this, and I'm using 2 colors quite close together, is when you stitch your blocks together, you will notice if I've got the darker color there and I've got light here, when you complete it, it actually gives it more like a 3D effect if you play a little bit with your fabric colors. So 2 pieces of each per block that you're going to do. And then batting. My batting, I cut all my other fabrics that I've just shown you, I've cut larger than my actual block is, so that I have enough space that when it stitches, that I've got enough space to actually place it the way I like, especially for a print, and also that I can cut nicely around it without too much difficulty. If you cut it too small, it's very difficult to get with the scissors in there. So cut your fabric a little bit larger. The batting, if you decide you're going to do the 8x8 blocks, cut your 2 pieces of batting exactly 8x8. You're not going to add any seam allowance or nothing to it. You cut it 8x8. 1 layer we're going to use for the front and 1 layer we're going to use for the back. But you will see as we progress with the design. If you use the 6x6, for example, you will cut 2 pieces 6x6. I did not include designs smaller than the 6x6 for the simple reason is this is a 6x6 little block. Now you can see the amount of detail in the block, so this area is going to become very, very dense if I make it any smaller. So for the complete block, I won't be able to give you this smaller than 6x6. But what I will do is in the set, I will make this little square inside, I will resize to 5x5 and 4x4. But you won't have the addition of this one. So you will be able to use that block then for the 4x4 and 5x7 loop on white fabric like this. Or you can pre-quilt your fabric similar like I did here, and then stitch your block on top of that if you would like. But I just had to explain to you the reason why 4x4 and 5x5 is not included in the set for the complete block. The detail is just too much to make it that small, and you will end up with lots of needle breaks and lots of frustration. So I'd rather leave those sizes out. So let's go to the machine. You're going to load your design onto your machine. And it's first going to stitch an outline onto your stabilizer, which might look like a step that I could have left out. But the reason I did that is so that you know exactly where to place your batting after you did the first step. So you don't have to eyeball it, especially because we've cut it already in the exact size that it needs to be. So let's go to the machine and stitch the first step, and I'll show you how to place your fabric. I've now stitched the first step. I'm just going to place a piece of fabric behind or paper so that you can see the outline where I'm going to put my batting on. So I'm going to use 505 spray. I do not like to use pins under my embroidery machine where possible. I always use 505 spray. You don't need to buy the same make. There are different makes of temporary spray adhesive specifically for embroidery machines, so do shop around. I like to use 505. I've been using it for many years. It's kind to your machine and washes away clearly without being too tacky on your frames. So lightly spray just in the center and place your batting on top. You're now going to take it back to the machine, and the machine is going to tack down your batting in place. The batting is now stitched to the soluble, and there's little bits left over, so I'm just going to take my scissors and cut the extra away. You will notice that the line that tacked down the batting is a little bit inward from the original line that stitched first. It's so that your batting is a little bit smaller than your block is actually going to be, to make double sure that there is no batting in your seam allowance. After you cut away the batting, we're going to stitch the next step. And the next step is just going to show you exactly where to place your next piece of fabric. You can see that these two corners were outlined. Now if you look at a block that I've already completed, it will be these two green corners. I'm going to take my green fabric that I previously cut, and it's going to be overlaid over the whole block. Make sure you got plenty of space on either side, as your green fabric is going to form part of your seam allowance, so you need a little bit of flesh there. We're going to cut it to 1.5 inches from the edge after we finished our block, so that's why you need extra space around. You can use a little bit of 505. I don't put 505 in the center, only where the fabric needs to stay. Otherwise, it's a bit difficult to separate the batting from your fabric and to cut out the center part that we need to cut. So gently spray just in those corners. If you want, you can spray on the soluble and just make sure that it's tacked down so it can't move. Place it back under the machine to tack down those two corners. As you can see, the fabric is tacked down with a zigzag stitch, so we can now remove the center of the fabric. You're not going to cut these parts away. Like I say, we do need it for seam allowance. So you're just going to cut this part in the center. I'll show you how I do it. First make a little hole and then just start right next to the zigzag stitches. When I come to the corner, I just take my scissors and just round it off like this, so I keep this little corner in place. Excuse me. Again on this corner, I'm just going to leave that corner in place. It doesn't really matter what shape you cut that, because remember there's going to be another fabric overlaying this. So as long as you can even cut it open, it doesn't really matter, as long as you don't cut those parts. This corner you can take away if you want. I tend to like to leave it in place. Otherwise you sit with little bits of fabric here. When you start stitching it together, you can see in this, you're going to have this small little piece. So it's better if you have the green at the back that you can see this one I cut open. So I'm actually going to use with this block the soluble as my back fabric, just to keep it all together nicely. After you cut away the green fabric, you can put it back under the machine to outline for you where the next fabric is going to be placed. As you can see, the outline for the next area was outlined. It's going to be this corner, the top corner, and it's going to be the center of the block. I've used white, as in this block. You can see the white corners and the center where the quilting will be on. And I've used scuba fabric, which is a soft, stretchable fabric that's a little bit thicker than normal fabric, as you can see. And it's got a nice stretch. I'm just going to put some 505 spray right in the center and try and put it on the corners there, just to keep it in place, but it should stay firmly there so during stitching. I would suggest that if your machine at this stage, the foot height can be set it a little bit higher. I saw on previous videos and where people ask me why puckers start happening. It's because the foot of your machine is too low, and it actually presses into the fabric, and while it stitches, then it pushes the fabric forward. So even on my machine, I've set my foot height a little bit higher. Now I do realize that some of your smaller machines does not have that option. So for the smaller machines, if you feel that you get a lot of puckering during stitching, or that the foot is pushing your fabric around, I do suggest using a very thin batting, and do not go to thicker batting, as you will get more puckers then. That's something we can't really control. It really depends on the machine foot and how high it can be set or not. If you have very thick fabric or thick batting, just set your foot a little bit higher to avoid the fabric from being shifted into little puckers. Let's go back to the machine and stitch the zigzag stitch to tack down our scuba fabric. With the white fabric all tacked down, we're ready to cut away the extra fabric. So gently lift it up and press your scissors as close to the zigzag stitches as you can. For those who wonder what type of scissors I'm using, these are Frawley's, the make. It's a curved handle scissors, very sharp. I've been using these for probably 16 years and it's really long-lasting scissors. They are not cheap, but they are well worth every cent. And you can really get as close to these stitches without cutting them. Many people have difficulty with applique designs. It's mostly due to using the wrong scissors. With the white all cut away, we're ready to take it back to the machine to outline the next area that's going to be filled with fabric. We are now ready to place our printed fabric. Now people ask me, how do I select fabrics for a quilt? I like to normally first count how many pieces to cut different colors I'm going to use. So we're going to use 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 colors. I normally will choose one very busy print and then I will start to tone it down with softer tones and some plain ones to balance it out. I try to use the colors that is in my printed fabric, so I will try and match, for this example, a green, and I like to one color to make it really pop. Like in this one, you can see the red is really bringing it, making it, to life. In this case, I thought this copper color will really bring out the copper in the print. And I really didn't feel that another printed fabric would be necessary in this block that I'm going to do. Okay, so let's place our next fabric. Now, if you've got a print and you want to, because this is the area we're going to fill. So, for example, you want that little bird's head, then you will place it, make sure that you've got the head or whatever you want in at that stage. And then you can cut it off on the side and then place this side as well so that you have exactly whatever you want to see in your block. So I would like that little bird to show. So I'm just going to get in here with my scissors and cut that corner. Then I'm going to spray adhesive on the back of my fabric rather than on my block. I don't want everything full of glue there. And then I'm going to make sure that my little bird's head is where I want it and that the rest of the area is also covered as it should be. I'm going to do the same for the bottom. I'm going to decide what part I want in there. Now, I think maybe because I'm using this copper color, I need a little bit more copper in my actual design. So I'm going to use that little bird there. Or maybe let's use this yellow one. I think she's going to fit in there perfectly. Now, like I said previously, Placing fabric like this, where you want specific prints to show, it does waste a little bit of fabric. But remember, you can really move around your fabric and use every little piece in there. Just make sure that these two areas don't overlap so that it's stitched together and create bulky areas. So let's go back to the machine, and we're going to tack that down, and then we're going to cut it all around and do the next fabric. Let's trim away the extra fabric and see how our little bird looks in this corner. This yellow fabric is called Wild Wings and Rosemary Millet. I'm not sure, it says licensed by David Textiles. As far as I know, this was imported from USA by the fabric store, so it should be available in many countries. Just look at that, beautiful. So although this quilt was meant as a Christmas quilt, remember not all of the designs, for example this little bird, it can be used outside of Christmas as well. Hope, peace, love, the words, the different words, the little angel, it can really be used on any time of year. It's not really specifically a Christmas quilt. You can see the bird in the corner. Now we're going to go back to the machine, and it's going to outline the corners we're going to do with our copper fabric. With the first corners outlined, we're ready now to add our first color fabric. I'm going to use the light color first. I'm going to spray fast spray on the back of my block, my fabric, and I'm going to place that over. Make sure that you have enough overlap in the corner there, because remember this is going to form part of our seam allowance. And I'm going to, on the far left hand or right hand corner, I'm going to add my darker fabric. I'm going to use this as a little mug rug, so it doesn't really matter what fabric I use. This is organza fabric. This is like upholstery fabric. This is suede. The white is scuba, and the print is a cotton fabric. If you do it for a quilt, I do recommend using the same type of fabric for all your fabrics, so that it doesn't distort or anything in the wash. So let's get back to the machine and secure these pieces in the hoop. And again, just trim away the extra fabric. When you come to where the seam allowance is supposed to be, just cut across. So you're going to leave that piece intact. When we trim the whole block to size, then we will automatically trim these flaps as well. If you worry that they will come under the machine, just lightly spray 505 just to keep them in place, or put a pin if you like using pins rather. Do the same for this side. And I'm just going to cut across there to keep my fabric as a seam allowance, and do the same on this side. Now the last area will be outlined. Because I know this is the last pieces, I'm going to just go ahead and place my fabric. And going to place my bottom fabric. and back to the machine to tack those two down in spot. Let's cut away the last pieces of fabric. Like you can see, this is a very simple applique method where you've got an outline to show you where to put your fabric, and then you've got a tack down stitch to tack down your fabric, then you cut away your fabric. So it's actually, the steps are very easy to follow. There is really nothing major difficult to it. But it's always good to see somebody else do it so that you can fully understand the steps. Okay, so that was the last of our fabric that we had to place. All fabric is where it should be now. Now to choose your color for your thread, in this case, I like to balance out my colors throughout. I've got the green here and I've got some green in there. So I've decided that the satin stitches that's going to finish off all these raw edges, I'm going to keep on the green. But then this color I really want to flow out and bind everything together, and it will pick up there. So I decided to choose my color thread that I'm going to use for all the decorative stitching, to use this color to really bring everything together. So just see what color works for you. Try and use the colors that's in your printed fabric, as that will really, you can't really make a mistake with that. Even if I chose to do the green on top, it will still bring everything together because it is a color that is used commonly in the whole block. So let's get stitching on those satin stitches and see how that develops. Don't worry yet about the back, friends. You will see how we do the back in a minute. We're first going to finish all the satin stitches, and that will finish off the front for now. And then we're going to add your back batting and fabric, and then we're going to do the final step, which will be your decorative quilting stitches on top. Now that we've finished stitching the satin stitches, we're ready to add our batting and fabric to the back. So turn your hoop wrong way facing you. Spray lightly with 505 spray. Add your one layer of batting. And your batting is exactly the size pre-cut that your block is. So there won't be necessary to cut anything further than that. Spray again with 505 spray, and also spray on the edges, as we're going to put a large piece of fabric on top, and we don't want this to move during stitching because it's going to be on the bottom side of the hoop. We need it to be nice and flat and secure, so it will stay that way. You can see it's firmly in place, it won't go anywhere. So we're going to place this back under the machine, and we're now going to stitch the decorative stitches on top. I do recommend that if you're going to use, in this case I'm going to use this color as my decorative stitches, but on the back I really want a green color, tone on tone. So I've pre-wound my bobbins with the color that I want to use for the back. So wind some bobbins on with the color you want to use and pop those bobbins in. If you're going to use pre-wound bobbins or white at the bottom, if that is what you like, then that's fine as well. But if you want a nice quilt background with tone on tone color, then I would recommend match your bobbin thread. Let's get to the machine and start stitching the final step. Our block is stitched out now, so we can remove it from the hoop. And here you can see the front, and this is our back. You can see how beautiful the back is with the green thread on top of the green fabric. I think it really looks very elegant, and I won't even mind a quilt just like this without any patchwork on it. If you do want to have just this, you will just move your machine past all of the steps until you have the last step. So what you will then do is just hoop your top fabric, your batting, or if you would like your blocks like this one without any quilting on top, with just thread on the fabric, as I really think this looks very elegant and smart, what you will do is you will hoop still only your soluble and then add your batting on top with your fabric, and at the same time add your batting to the wrong side of the hoop and your fabric to the wrong side of the hoop. You will then place it in your machine and then move your machine right up to the last step. This last step that we've done, and that's the only stitching you will be doing on the block. Remove from the hoop and trim away your edges, and your block is done. I think this will really make a very elegant quilt with just the detail stitching on. Let's trim our block to size now. I am using a 2-inch ruler, and I'm going to line it up to 1.5 inch from my zigzag. Stitch it right on the edge. I'm just going to line it up 1.5 inches, and I'm going to take my rotary trimmer and just cut away the extra fabric. And I'm going to do that on all 4 sides. The quilting rulers really make cutting to size easy. Like I said previously, I really do recommend that you get yourself 1 or 2 good quality quilting rulers. And on the last side. And there is our very first block for our quilt. In the next video, part 2 of this quilt along, I will show you how to stitch your blocks together. Thank you for watching part 1. See you back for part 2.